Silence is often praised as strength, discipline, loyalty. But what happens when silence becomes survival, and survival starts to destroy you? Today, I'm breaking ranks. You are listening to Breaking Ranks. We Can't Be Silenced. I'm your host, Rachel, and this podcast exists for those who were taught to endure quietly and are finally choosing to speak. This first episode is about why this space exists at all, what happened in my life, and where it all started. Today, I want to talk about silence, where it comes from, who it protects, and what it costs the people forced to carry it. If you've ever felt like your voice didn't matter or that speaking up would cost you everything, this episode is for you. Before we continue, I want to be clear. This podcast discusses real experiences that may include trauma, abuse, and difficult subject matter. Listener discretion is advised. This podcast is not professional or legal advice. These are lived experiences shared honestly, with care, and with the hope that no one feels alone in them. My name is Rachel. I created this podcast because for a long time, silence felt mandatory, not just encouraged, expected. I learned early on that keeping my head down, following orders, and not asking questions was the safest way to survive. And for a while, that worked. Until it didn't. There came a moment where I realized that silence was not protecting me anymore. It was protecting the systems that harmed me, and the cost of staying quiet became heavier than the fear of speaking up. Breaking Ranks exists because there are so many of us carrying stories we were never supposed to survive, let alone tell. And this is me choosing to tell mine and making room for others to be able to tell theirs too. In a lot of environments, silence is rewarded. You're told it's strength, discipline, maturity. But silence has a dark side, especially when it's enforced. When people are punished for speaking up, when harm is minimized, when survivors are told to move on, silence becomes a weapon, and too often, it's aimed at the most vulnerable. I remember the internal battle, wanting to say something, knowing something was wrong, and also knowing exactly what speaking up could cost me. Reputation, career, safety, the list continues. So I stayed quiet, and I told myself I was being strong. But strength that requires self-erasure is not strength, it's survival mode, and living that way takes a toll. So let me share with you my story and why this podcast became a space for you to share yours. It was June of 2017. Little did I know, my life was about to change forever. I was sent cranking on my ship, which is something everyone in the Navy does at some point. Basically, it's where you're sent TAD to help another division. I was sent to help the culinary specialists. Little did I know, my time there was going to be cut short. I made a few good friends while I was there. However, there was a guy who would follow me around anytime we were on the same shift. Never really thought of anything of it, because we were on a ship. There's only so many ways to get to places, so it's inevitable that you will often see the same person behind you, especially since I knew that he was a CS, and I assumed that he was just doing the things he needed to get done. It was not until during one of his off shifts, he would show up and follow me around as well, that I began to realize something was very wrong. Deep down, I knew I should tell someone, but I didn't. I was the new girl. I was just the temporary person in their space, so I felt like I couldn't say anything. Little did I know that this decision would change my life forever. Not too long after that, One day, he came up to me in the P-way. And for those of you not familiar with Navy terminology, that's like a hallway, like on a ship. As he walked up, he grabbed me, pulling me into a storage room right next to where we were. He covered my mouth and shut the door and proceeded to then grope me and start trying to get his hands into my uniform. It did not go down without a fight. I shoved him away, which then caused him to shove me back. And that was all I remember before realizing I was in medical. The medical officer explained to me that he had seen me laying on the floor and asked what happened. I wasn't sure what to say or do because at that point, I was utterly confused myself. The next day, I was talking to a good friend of mine that I worked with back in my shop before going cranking, and she told me that I needed to report it to SAPR, which for the Navy is the Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Program, that I can have options to either have it pursued or to not have it pursued, and it was my choice. I trusted her. To this day we're still friends. So I filled the report out, but kept it restricted, so it was only a need-to-know basis. During everything, I was trying to continue to live life and to go about my work. I had anxiety and depression, and honestly, I felt like I was not even there most days, which is when I started seeing ship psych, where I had therapy and was put on some medication. Somehow, word of what happened spread throughout the ship. I was sent back to work with my shop and hoped that helped with how I felt every day. Well, he told all his coworkers, so I was at that point being denied food, day in and day out. Instead of continuing to try, I would just bring food or had loads of ramen that I could make in my shop. Eventually, it got so bad with underways and not being able to eat enough that I requested a transfer, which was one of the options after reporting. But it also made the report unrestricted. This transfer would give me a chance for a new start where nobody knew what happened, with the exception of the CO, the XO, and the CMC of my new command. Once my transfer was approved, I was moved to a ship a few piers down. My chief made me let him walk me over there, which he then in turn, right in front of me, told everybody why I was transferring. What had happened to me. I remember standing there thinking, what the fuck is this? This is not how it was supposed to happen. Nobody was supposed to know. However, once he left, I was welcomed by my new chain of command and the whole shop with open arms. They all ended up being like brothers to me. Though my time there was short, they all had my back, every last one, and I'm so thankful for that. I had so many appointments due to mental health, and they were gearing up for deployment, so my chain of command sat me down and told me my options, as there was no mental health on the small ships. So we came to the conclusion that I would go LIMDU, which in the Navy is limited duty, where they send you for appointments. You'll work at the hospital in most cases, and you get to focus on your mental health or any injuries that you might have that caused you to be LIMDU. And the goal for that is to get better to go back to the fleet. Now, at this point, we're in the end of August of 2017. Little did I know that this month, this would be the month that changed my whole course of my military career. And not for the better. My friend Michael, that I knew from when I first joined the military, was coming home from deployment. We decided to hang out, get some food with his family, and just spend some time hanging out with the family. We started with dinner with his family and friends. After dinner, I drove him to his friend's place to go pick up his car, and so he could unpack his things. Well, we sat in the car once parked, talking, finishing up our conversation, and then something changed. Something inside him just not in full. He started trying to get me to do things to him. I kept saying no because we were friends. I didn't want a relationship, and I had just had that incident on the ship and was trying to recover from that. He even knew about that situation, not in full detail, but he knew something happened. Well, me saying no did not work. He grabbed me by the hair, forcing me to go down on him. After that, I went home, threw his stuff from my car before I went home, and I just did not talk to him for a few days. Granted, he immediately apologized in a text and voicemail. He kept saying he doesn't know what came over him. And I just ignored him for a few days. Well, I was foolish, and after a few days, I believed that he was sorry, and I forgave him. And I went and hung out with him and his friends, as I was invited to a party they were having at a hotel. I know what you're thinking, probably. Why the fuck would you give him a chance and forgive him, let alone agree to hang out with him again? The short answer is, I don't know. After all these years, I still feel stupid for that choice. I'm still healing and working through everything years later. Anyways, I show up to the party, which had a low turnout. Or, maybe looking back, it was all planned all along. Less people. It was Michael, me, his friend's girlfriend, and like one other person. There was alcohol involved, which I chose to stay away from because I knew I had to drive home. A little bit later, maybe like 30 minutes to an hour, I was getting ready to leave. My friend and everyone else was just wasted, and I didn't want to be around it. He wanted to go to his hotel room, which was upstairs, and he could barely walk straight. So I helped him to his room, where he then stumbled with a key card for a good long minute. I took it, helped him, and then turned to leave. He grabbed me and shoved me onto the bed, where he then proceeded to undress and rape me. I was screaming to stop, telling him no over and over again, pushing him off of me, but nothing worked. I blacked out, which I think was my brain trying to protect me. So I can't remember how long it lasted. And he had stopped and immediately passed out. So I got up and left to my barracks room. I just wanted to go shower. I was not going to say anything because of how the first assault happened. I just didn't want to speak up. I didn't want to deal with any possible backlash. My roommate noticed something was wrong, and she turned the shower off and asked what had happened. I broke down. I sat on the floor crying, telling her everything. She got up, got my things ready, got her things ready, and said, "We're going to the hospital." After fighting with her and arguing with her for a bit, I reluctantly agreed. I had a kit done. They assigned me a victim's advocate, asked me again since I was there, and they had to do a report if I wanted it restricted or non-restricted. I chose restricted. I didn't want anyone knowing because of what happened before. Well, after getting back to the room and sleeping all of the next day, I woke up to dozens of texts and calls from him. I didn't want to talk to him. He left voicemails, everything. He even went into detail about what he did, apologizing. I didn't answer him. I ended up calling base police because at that point I was being harassed. I had blocked his number, and he would text me off of friends' phones or call me from friends' phones. So I ended up changing the report from restricted to unrestricted. And then that, unfortunately, because it happened off base, I had to meet with the local police department, and they had to take me down to the station for questioning. I couldn't drive myself to the station. I had to ride in the back of the police car, as a victim, mind you. And then finally got my victim's advocate to show up. And after a really, really long night of questioning and basically being interrogated, asking what happened, asking for all the details, asking for the name of the hospital, the whole shebang, I finally got to go home. I got a ride home from my victim's advocate back to the barracks, and went on with my life as much as I possibly could. Fast forward about a week or two, and I was hanging out with a friend of mine. And one night, she and I were going to watch a movie and have some snacks, as we often did. So we went to Walmart to get the snacks. And as we were shopping, we noticed two people following us. So we kept a close watch. And as we went to check out, they walked out the door with nothing. So we checked out and headed out, realizing that they were by the front, and they followed us toward the car, but they got in their own. We drove away, and not long after, we realized that they were following us. So my friend, did the whole make so many consecutive turns. We didn't lead them to where we were going, and they were still following us. We even drove, to a different town, right, like 10 minutes out, and they were still following us. Well, then she thought and asked me if anything I had on me was from him. And I said, "Oh my God, I'm still wearing the necklace that he got me." Turned out that we're almost certain it was a tracker, because once she threw it out the window over the bridge we were on, and we lost them, they did not reappear behind us. Because as we were going, we'd make a few turns, and they wouldn't be behind us immediately, but then they'd end up right there again. This time, they didn't end up behind us again. So I then immediately went and asked for a protection order. And the civilian side said, "Well, you'll have to go to see a judge." Okay, bring me in front of a judge, not a problem. So I also requested one with the military, which would be an MPO, which is a military protection order. That one was, given to me once I told my victim's advocate everything, and then she let the JAG officer know, and they were like, "Yeah, let's get that stamped and signed for you." Well, I had my JAG and my victim's advocate with me through court. We had to go to court 2 or 3 times before they granted me a temporary permanent protection order, because originally the emergency protective order is only for a week, and then you have to go to court. The temporary permanent one is I would have it for like a year or 2 years or 3 years. They gave this one to me for, I think 5 years is what the date was. But that was after him not showing up to court 2 or 3 times, and then finally the last time he showed up. And when I tell you, when I saw him walk into the courtroom, I tried to run, but unfortunately the way it was set up is the benches were only one-sided, so you could only get out one way. And my JAG officer and my victim's advocate were on the side of me where the entrance to the benches were. So when I tried to escape, I ran into the wall. Not literally ran, but I shoved myself into the wall, as far away from him as I possibly could get. And then we got called to the bench, and of course he called both of us to the bench. The judge did, and so my advocate and my attorney stood between him and myself, and I then had to tell the judge why I wanted a protective order and why I wanted it to be permanent. The judge granted it because right then and there, he told the judge, "Yeah, whatever, I did this." But he did it so nonchalantly too, which kind of infuriated me, and really does now looking back. But I walked out of there with my protection order, which helped because I had both civilian and military. So if he approached me on base or off base, I could call it in. After weeks go by, weeks and weeks and months go by, the civilian police refused to take the case, and they sat on the evidence. He also even confessed to the detective everything that he did. They told me that they refused to take it because his friend said that I was leaving the hotel at 7 a.m. with a smile on my face. Bitch, I was leaving the hospital at 7 a.m. in clothes that weren't mine. But apparently that didn't matter. I even had the paperwork to prove it. But nope, that did not matter. Then it took them weeks to hand it over to the Navy, so the Navy could decide if they were going to prosecute. But when they finally got custody of the evidence, I was told that there was a lack of evidence, so they could not pursue it. But that I could write his CO and hope that his CO would make and see my side and make them take him to mast, which is like captain's mast, where it's kind of like court for the ship. And so I did, because if that happened, they told me then they could take it to trial outside of the ship as well. But his CO said no, that there was no way his sailor did something of that sort. He didn't believe me. So I continued my rounds on Limdu, feeling like I'm not going to get to go anywhere with my career because I was getting better, but I was not getting to the point where I was not going to need therapy. So after 2 rounds of Limdu, they then found me fit to continue service, but due to my PTSD, the medication, and the therapy sessions that I was in, they found me not deployable, so I lost orders. I then got shore orders and finished out my contract, but not without sexual harassment from an LPO there as well. Once my contract was up, I got out in 2021, and years later, I'm speaking up, and I will continue to speak up for myself as well as for others, because we cannot be silenced. What I've learned from this is silence does not heal trauma, time does not erase harm, and staying quiet does not make you resilient, it makes you isolated. Speaking out isn't about revenge or anger, it's about reclaiming your humanity. Never let someone silence you. They don't get to do that. I know speaking up can be hard, especially if there has been more than one instance where you were let down by the system. But here and now, on this podcast, you are safe to allow your voice to be heard. If you take nothing else from this episode, take this. You are not weak for surviving quietly, and you are not wrong for wanting more than silence. Your voice matters, even if you're not ready to use it yet. It takes time to be ready to share your story, and I have faith that you will reach that point too, even if it's not today, even if it's weeks, months, or even years from now. It is okay to take your time. If this episode resonated with you, I invite you to follow the podcast and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you have a story you're not ready to tell publicly, that's okay. This space will be here when you are. But if you are ready, please feel free to reach out to me by email at breakingrankswecan'tbesilenced@gmail.com or on TikTok at Breaking Ranks Podcast. Once you reach out, we will talk and get you ready to share. Thank you for listening. Thank you for choosing courage, even quietly. This is Breaking Ranks, and we cannot be silenced.